Thank you very much. I'd be very interested in feedback from you about terms like moksha or dharma or rasa and how that fits into some of the work that I'd like to share with you. Because I was a little nervous about trying to figure that out myself because I'm sure I'll get it wrong. So please do what you can to be educative to me. I would greatly appreciate it. I think I'd like to start just by telling you a little bit about the basic idea that's going to run through the paper so you're prepared to understand it a little bit better. When I work with couples, the work with couples is really, there are two people in the room, but the way I like to think about it is as if I'm working with each person separately and with the couple, but all at the same time in the room. So we're talking about multiple transferences, multiple counter-transferences, and it's just the easiest way I can describe it is a fluid double vision of how to think about the two people and their relationship, and at times also their children. The concept of hope has been something that I've been struggling with for a very long time, and it really began for me when I was a very young therapist. One of my first patients that I saw for about 10 years, twice a week. It was an individual case. She did not have much money. She was a traumatized young woman at the time. She was alcoholic. And we did a lot of good work together. And at the end of the 10 years, she terminated and moved on. And, but our last session was very meaningful to me. And the last session, she gave me a gift. The way I was trained, when you got a gift from a patient, you tried to analyze it. The gift the gift in this case was a little complicated because it was our last meeting. And the gift was a tape recording, the old-fashioned cassettes. And so she gave me the cassette, and it was music. And I knew she was a jazz aficionado. She loved jazz. And she said, these are her favorite jazz songs. So I said, is it okay if I put it in the tape recorder and we listen to it? And she said, of course. I figured I'd analyze it that way. I was trying to be clever. It didn't work because I couldn't understand what the singer was singing. There was one refrain that kept going over and over, and so finally I said, tell me what this is. And so she told me it was a song by a terrific jazz composer named Al Jarreau, and the song was I Believe. So that was the one refrain, I believe. So I said, gee, I said to myself, this is the first song on a whole bunch of songs. This must be the most important one. And I said, what's so important about this song to you? So then she told me that when she came into treatment, she had a plan to kill herself. And that the only thing that she decided was going to prevent her from killing herself was going to be treatment. And so she had this hope that therapy was going to make a difference in her life. And so she gave me the tape, and we talked some more, and we said goodbye. And I went home, and I played it a couple of times, and then it went on the shelf, along with the other cassettes. And then one day, before I was traveling to Moscow to give a talk, I must have picked up the tape and played it, listened to music, and suddenly I remembered all this. And from the time I went to Moscow to St. Petersburg, because I was teaching there too, I realized that I had totally not understood the amazing gift that she had actually given me. It wasn't just a piece of music, it was an idea. And so I started to think about it, and I started to think about how incredibly important the word hope is, and how it is part of our language. In fact, there is no conversation that any of us can have, if you think about it, where the word hope does not appear in the conversation. It's so amazing. If you If you ever have lunch or dinner and you're sitting at a table by yourself, and not that you want to, but you accidentally listen to what other people are saying as they're eating, you'll hear that they talk about their mother, their father, and they use the word hope. Those three things are common to almost all conversations I've ever eavesdropped on. I was taking a walk with some of the students I had the previous time I was in St. Petersburg, and they were asking me what I was going to talk about, so I told them I was going to talk about this. And then I realized there was actually an even larger context for thinking about this. This large context has to do with how powerful hope is, that it can sustain a people. And so the example that I came up with was the Jewish people. Those of you may or may not know, but in what the area then was called Palestine, around 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. And after the Romans destroyed the temple, there was what's known as a diaspora, and that is all of the Jewish people from that area in Palestine were dispersed all over the world. Some of them probably came to India and settled, I think, in Kerala and lots of other places. And so they lost their temple, they lost their homeland, and they were dispersed for 2,500 years. But there's one thing that every year that they did, and that is that they celebrated a holiday called Passover, which was the holiday that tells the story about freedom from slavery in Egypt. And that holiday has a series of stories that you read each year. And the very last 3 words in that story is next year, well, actually 4 words, next year in Jerusalem, which is kind of a crazy idea, because if you think about people that have been dispersed for 2,500 years with no chance to get back to Jerusalem, but they would say that every year. And the Dalai Lama actually became very interested in this and actually brought a number of senior Jewish theologians to a meeting because he wanted to discover what it was that made it possible for people who have been so under such duress for such a long period of time to continue to survive and thrive. And there's a movie they actually made about this encounter called The Jew and the Lotus. At any rate, that idea about hope and sustaining itself finally came into fruition in 1948 when actually Israel became a state. And so suddenly people had their homeland again. So it's rather dramatic about how powerful hope can be. I just wanted to show you a couple of slides. How do I do this? A pointer. So I'm going to look for the newspaper slides first. So what I'm just showing you, these are recent headlines from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I just want you can just scroll through them one at a time. You can just see, these are the headlines. That's an old one, actually. You will not be able to read a newspaper without finding some headline that has the word hope in it. You can go to the next one, please. Everybody see that? For those that can't see it, for Philippine children, return of play is a sign of hope. Actually, can you go back? I'm going to read the headlines. In Haiti, hope is the last thing lost. Pakistan rekindles hope of Afghan-Taliban talks. Well, this one's an old one. Sometimes we'll talk about this. There's real hope and there's false hope. So beyond revenge, hope. All right, we can go forward. New hope for financial stocks for those of you that are investment people. Britain's heads home as hope dies. Very interesting concept. Hope dies. We can hold that there for a minute. Now, I have about 20 more of them, but I don't want to bore you. But you get the idea that this is really quite powerful, and it just keeps happening. There's one more story. The Wall Street Journal had an article that caught my attention. It was an editorial, and it was titled "Hope Against Hope," and it's a story about two men that go to a baseball game in probably Boston, and somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, in the middle of the game, they both touch their pockets and they realize they lost their wallets. It's gone. So they start looking for their wallets, and they can't find them. At 5 o'clock, one of them says, "I'm never going to find my wallet." The other one still keeps looking. But they leave, because the game's over. At 6 o'clock, one person finds both their wallets. Now, this is something that actually has it's called Talmudic law, and in the Jewish religion, rabbis make decisions based on certain ancient writings, and so a rabbi was called in, for the sake of this article, to make a determination about whether or not these wallets can be kept by the person who found them, or they have to be returned. And the determination was that only one wallet had to be returned to its owner, not the other. Anybody know why? Anybody have a guess? I know you're not Talmudic experts, but you don't have to be. Can you think of why one wallet should be returned and the other wallet should not be returned? Anybody have any idea? Yes?
Since the one person didn't, like, say, I will never find it.
He didn't give up hope.
Yeah.
So the law actually was based on this concept of not giving up hope. That's how powerfully it insinuated not only the culture, but also the religion. Now, karma. Karma has some different meanings, but one of the meanings for karma is hope. When you use the word karma, do you ever use it in that context? Do you think about it that way? I'm really asking because I don't know. No. So why is the word karma also the word for hope? I don't know the answer. I'm just asking.
Karma is not the word for hope.
It's not. Okay, well then that's the answer. What's the word for hope?
Umid.
Asha.
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 Also the name of good-looking women. But yeah.
Well, that's very important to know. But that's for a man. But what about for a woman? What's a woman's hope?
Good question.
So the last thing I'm going to talk about briefly before I read my paper is, whoops, I just closed the computer. Would you come back and do this? You noticed that. I thought I was done with it, and then I realized, oh, no, I have one more thing I have to do with this. So the key to everything I'm going to talk about is going to come up in a second. And it's, I'm going to show it to you first, and I can show it to you at the end again, because it's a little complicated to follow. I'm looking for this one. Oh, great. Okay. Just press this in. So this topic is, for me at least, is really about change. So the whole question is, how do people change? And as clinicians, how do you help them to change?
Can you make it a bit bigger, Urvashi?
Yeah, I'll zoom into the part.
Yeah.
Can everybody see this?
No.
No.
Now it's better, yeah.
Can I make a suggestion? Those people in the back, come forward. You'll see better.
Yeah, I think that's
Come on,
good.
don't be shy. The ones in the way back, come forward. That's right. More. Don't stop. If you want to see this, you have to get closer. It's not dangerous. It will not hurt you. It might help. So first of all, change is really, one way to think about it, it's reworking the transferences. Change is all about disruption and repair. And if you think about infant development, those are our models. Babies and their mothers constantly are experiencing disruptions, and the mothers that are tuned into those disruptions repair them as quickly as possible. And so change is very closely connected to the process of repair. Now, let's go smaller because you won't be able to see the rest of this. So what you have here is a flow chart. So change is connected to the process of repair. Change is also connected to grieving, because for people that don't grieve, and if you just think of Freud's mourning and melancholia, the people that are stuck in that place, they're not going to be able to really change. Change also can involve the experience with a new object. I'm going to talk about Hans Lowell's work, where he, as an analyst, talks about how he becomes a new object for his analyst hands. Change also is involved with mentalization. Mentalization, for those of you that are not familiar with relational theory of psychoanalysis, mentalization involves thinking about what's going on in the mind of another and being able to help them understand what they're thinking and feeling. Reflective function is another form of that. Fonagy, who I'm sure you're familiar with his work, or Jessica Benjamin, or Lou Aaron. These are all people that talk about reflective function, mentalization. And finally, creative repetition, which I'll go into a little bit in the paper. That's Lowell's concept, where instead of the repetition compulsion reoccurring, something new happens. The best example I could give you, for those of you that have either read or seen the play Les Miserables, it's a perfect story where someone is sent to jail for stealing a loaf of bread to help his niece who is starving. And all he could think about is freedom, freedom, freedom. His name is Jean Valjean, and he gets out of jail, and suddenly he can't get a job because he's a convict. He cannot find a place to live because no one will let him live because he's a convict. And he gets very bitter. And at that moment, a priest takes him in and gives him a place to stay and food to eat. But Jean Valjean has already decided he's done. And he leaves the priest's house, I think with the priest's silver candelabra. And the jailer that hated him, Javert, comes after him, finds him, arrests him, brings him back to the priest. And in that moment was when my heart sank. I watched as the jailer says to the priest, "Is this the man that stole your candelabra?" And you know when he says yes, that Jean Valjean is going to go back to jail and he's going to die there. But the priest doesn't say yes. The priest says, "You forgot to take the wine chalice." And the whole story changes as a result of that encounter with a new object, who is the priest, and the way that he's dealing with Jean Valjean. Which changes Jean Valjean because he internalizes that, and then that becomes something that he does in his own life with other people. So another critical factor in terms of change and the process of repair is also mutual recognition. Two people who are in a relationship, if that's not present, not much is going to happen. And in fact, when that's not present is when you have relationship breakdown. Change is also deeply impacted by this concept of the third, which is written about by Jessica Benjamin, Lou Aaron, and a number of other people, Ogden as well. And that's the mental state to negotiate and renegotiate, meaning the capacity to hold the other person in mind. All negotiation happens essentially in the third. if you speak to any businessman, you'll tell a successful businessman all of their business deals work because they're thinking about their position, they're thinking about the other person's position, and when two people do that, they automatically move to a third space. And that third space is where something can change. As you'll see, hope is connected to the third, and all of these process of repair are then connected through hope. I'm calling hope, there's a lot of different ways to call it. It's a transitional space where change and possibility exist, and it's a portal to the third. Now, what I think makes this possible, if we can go up a little bit, are what I call the four horsemen. I'm sorry, down. The four horsemen. These are what I call the four horsemen. Love, empathy, hope, and the third, and actually there's a fifth, which is overcoming fear. These five things are deeply connected to any process where change is going to occur. In fact, hope and fear are essentially arch enemies. Where you have little hope, you have a great amount of fear. Where you have less fear, you have more hope. Transference, of course, is deeply connected to hope because hope, in fact, is a transference. It's a central ingredient in the relational mix. And potential space is connected again with hope. And I'm going to talk about Winnicott and the magic mirror, which is a wonderful example of this idea of potential space and where change can occur. Hope is the crucial ingredient in every love. So when Anurag was talking about men and women, there isn't some beginning love that doesn't have this. All right, let me start the paper then. Now.